Megami Tensei is one of the three major JRPG series with Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. The series has a cult legacy in Japan with more than 50 games starting from 1987 and is still highly regarded as of today. It is now also really loved overseas thanks to the success of Persona 3, 4 and 5 in America and Europe. Megami Tensei is one of the most precursory series and also the most complex one, with most of its games being released only in Japan. The games cover such thematics as cyberpunk, romance, dark fantasy, urban fantasy, detective story, myths and religions, in a way so perfect that nothing seems contradictory. Everything is so coherent and well written that the whole multiverse makes sense even after more than 50 games, all intertwined with each other. The games used to be sold with a booklet containing at least one chronology table consistent with the whole series, where we learned over the time that the whole multiverse can be introduced through three different time axes. The first one depicts events that happen before and after that nuclear missiles are launched on Tokyo in 1909X with games like Megami Tensei 2, Shin Megami Tensei 1, 2 and 9, Majin Tensei and Giton Megami Tensei. The second axis is a what-if parallel universe where Tokyo's destruction didn't happen, starting with Shin Megami Tensei If, and then with Devil Summoner, Soul Hackers and the Persona games. And finally, we'll learn with Shin Megami Tensei 3's Amara system that other universes that share the same events but not the same consequences can coexist, similarly to Leiji Matsumoto's Multiverse created for the Harlock and Galaxy Express 39 sagas. Megami Tensei is based on a series of 9 novels written by Aya Nishitani and most exclusively on the first trilogy called Digital Devil Story. The first book, Megami Tensei, or Goddess Reincarnation, released in 1986, is the basis for the whole Megami Tensei series and contains elements and events that still continue to shape the most recent games. The book mostly talks about two thematics, computer theories and the demon world called Makai. Demons are called through a computer program, the Devil Summoning Program, which is in relation to the real world and the Makai. Demons must use the body of a sacrificed human to incarnate themselves physically within the real world. The story takes place in Tokyo, where Akemino Nakashima, a genius programmer who invented the Devil Summoning Program, was forced to sacrifice his love Yumiko after using his invention. Loki, the demonic king, is then reincarnated. It is said that Nakashima is the reincarnation of Izanagi, the god of religion, and Yumiko, the reincarnation of Izanami, the goddess of the creation. In the second novel, called Soul in Demon Capital, Nakashima is sent into the Makai so as to retrieve his love, Yumiko. Both characters are finally reincarnated in the third book, called End of Reincarnation, where they fight against Lucifer and can now start their journey for a peaceful world together. The second series of 6 books by Aya Nishitani, called Shin Digital Devil Story, like the Super Famicom games but with another kanji for Shin, started in 1990. These books influenced the first Persona game and Satomi Tadashi's script, and tells the fight between Nakashima and Yumiko against the Snow Queen, which is very similar to the Snow Queen quest in Persona. The Megami Tensei video games will later be influenced again by another book by Yu Godai called Quantum Devil Saga, which will serve as the draft story for the Digital Devil Saga Avatar Tuner games. These games were written by Satomi Tadashi, scenario writer for Persona 1 and 2, and share a similar relational kind of story, while other Megami Tensei games are mainly individualist quests. There are 2 totally different games that share the name Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei, made at the same time by 2 different companies for different supports, which are adaptations of Aya Nishitani's novels. The first one was made by Neon Telenet and released in 1987 on computer-based supports MSX, PC-88 and FM-77, while the second was made by the Atlas team, released by Namco on Famicom also in 1987. The Neon Telenet version is an action RPG similar to the Hills series, but takes place in one unique dungeon of 160 floors, separated into 3 worlds: the real world, the Makai, and the Abyss. The story is depicted through beautiful cutscenes. You play Nakashima, and you can gain experience points, earth points, and items. The game already introduced the moon phases concept, where demons gain power during the full moon. It is a difficult game, but I always loved the pacing, the minimal graphics, and the excellent music. The Atlas version is the first true Megami Tensei and the origin of the series as we know it. It was released on Famicom only a few days after the Neon Telenet version, with already 2/3 of the magic trio that will shape the series' legacy forever: Koji Okada as director and Tsukasa Masuko for the musics. Kazuma Kaneko was not involved in this first game, and instead the character design was made by Hiroyuki Kitasume, who also worked on the original video animation which screened in 1987. The game is a 3D dungeon RPG in a subjective point of view. The story takes place between the second and the third book, when demons are invading the real city of Tokyo and the heroes are going into the Makai. And because the third book was not yet published at the time, the game and the book contain some story differences. It is also considered as a sequel to the Megami Tensei original video animation. The game is a precursory in many elements. The most famous is the demon negotiation system, which will later be incorporated into Dragon Quest and Pokémon. Megami Tensei was the first game ever to introduce this system with the coherence between the game mechanics and the story. In Megami Tensei, you play as Nakashima and Yumiko, and you can talk to demons in battle and negotiate so that they join your party. Then you can use the Devil Summoning program to invoke demons in battles. Demons need magnetite to maintain their body into the real world, and each action will consume the magnetite gauge when they are invoked. Demons won't get experience points and can't equip items, but you can fuse them together inside the evil church in the city in order to strengthen them. The game is set in a cyberpunk and demoniac universe that was unique at the time and uses animated cutscenes to tell the story. In addition, various powerful enemies, mysteries, and traps are set within the vast 3D map, and it has become known as one of the most difficult games on the Famicom. As implied by the title of the game, you can keep your experience points and items when you die, and be reincarnated by Sharon if you choose to reload the game. The musics composed by Tsukasa Masuko are based on rock music, heavy on bass, and are played by a band called Project Satan. It was at the time a rare work of genius. The game has been praised in Japan for its major innovations, especially the demon negotiation system and its dark and unique atmosphere. The first Megami Tensei on Famicom was at last take on Aya Nishitani's digital device story novels. Even if most of the concepts and systems of future Megami Tensei games were already established in this first incarnation, it was only in the second episode, released in 1990, that the magic Megami Tensei trio of Koji Okada, Kasuma Kaneko, and Tsukasa Masuko would give the Megaten lore its first original story and designs, which will influence all future games in the series. Unlike the previous game based on the novels, Megami Tensei 2 has a completely original story. even if the themes and atmospheres are the same than in the first game. Megami Tensei 2 takes place in 2036 in Tokyo, which was destroyed by a nuclear bomb 40 years before. This event created a rift between the Makai and the real world, and demons are now ruling the world while survivors are living in shelters. It is the first episode to talk about the destruction of Tokyo by ICBMs in 1990X, and thus the first game to introduce the extremely complex Megami Tensei timeline and multiverse. The game keeps the computer theories from the novels, but adds controversial religious thematics. A fictional RPG called Devil Buster becomes popular within the survivors. The main character and his best friend are playing the game when they are absorbed inside by the demon Pazuzu, a messenger of YHVH, a god worshipped by a new religion called Messiah. Pazuzu gave the hero a devil summoning program and his best friend magical powers, so as they can defeat the demon king Baal. The game already shaped the rivalry between the two religions that would coexist within the Megami Tensei universe, the Church of Messiah and the Church of Gaia. In fact, the game is even already shaping what would become the story of Shin Megami Tensei 1, 2, and 9. Megami Tensei 2 is the blueprint for all those games that would follow. Even more impressive is the fact that the game introduces a moral choice within the story that resolve into multiple endings and, like the first Dragon Quest, prefigured Shin Megami Tensei 3's True Demon ending 15 years earlier. The gameplay is similar to Megami Tensei. It is a first-person dungeon RPG with turn-based combat where the hero talks to, battles and recruits demons. A new overworld map with a top-down view was added to this game. The total number of demons and conversation patterns has increased significantly. It is also the first episode to feature the demon and future Megami Tensei mascot Jack Frost within the Megaton lore, and the first appearance of YHVH, the only absolute god who created the world worshipped in Judaism and Christianity. The appearance of the god of the Hebrew Bible as an RPG monster was unprecedented in video games and caused various controversies. Once again, you can negotiate with demons and make them join your party, and fuse them to strengthen them like in Megami Tensei 1. You can now fuse two demons according to the law, neutral and chaos alignment, and sacrifice a third one to optimize the result of the fusion. There are now alignments for the heroes that are totally scripted but are still a major innovation that will be exploited in a better way in future games. Your friend will become the dark hero during the game while you play as the low hero. It is Kazuma Kaneko's first work on the series. His style wasn't yet perfectly established, but he designed the characters and all demons in the game. The sprites are impressive for the Famicom, especially during boss battles. And graphically, the game was altogether the darkest RPG of the time, but also the most colorful one with the best range of color for the Famicom era. Musically, the game uses a new 8-channel sound chip made by Namco, in addition to the standard programmable sound generator on the cartridge, which increases the number of simultaneous sounds. In addition, the ROM capacity has doubled to 4 megabits, the standard size of many Super Famicom games, with 2 megabits only for sound. Tsukasa Masuko made good use of these new capacities and composed and arranged a legendary soundtrack influenced once again by rock music and bass guitar. Megami Tensei 2 was highly evaluated in Japan reviews at the time and won several RPG awards. The overall gameplay and monster synthesis relationship has been considerably improved comparing to the first game. The game was praised for its ambitious story, depicting a cyberpunk and occult world. It was also considered a problematic game which emphasizes the duality of good and evil. These particularities were totally new for the genre and totally different from Dragon Quest IV and Final Fantasy III, which were released the same year. In fact, along with Wizardry 3, those games were called the 4 major RPGs of the time, all being legendary masterpieces. Both Megami Tensei would later be remade on Super Famicom as Kyu-Yaku Megami Tensei, released after Shin Megami Tensei 2 and Shin Megami Tensei Eve. Keeping the religious thematic, the compilation was subtitled Old Testament, while the Shin Megami Tensei games were considered as the New Testament. That's it. The Megami Tensei series is a biblical reinterpretation for the people of the 20th century. The game starts with a new introduction, telling that long time ago happened a rebellion between angels. Many were banished from heaven and driven into the demon world, the Makai, and became demons. Demons rarely appeared in the real world of humans for a long time, until someone created a devil summoning program. The compilation uses the system and graphical evolution of Shin Megami Tensei, and the two games are now connected, as some actions that you make on Megami Tensei 1 will have repercussions on Megami Tensei 2. Megami Tensei 1 is also easier to play and now uses save points. The demon illustrations and characters have been redrawn by Kazuma Kaneko, and the music was arranged by Hitoshi Sakimoto, famous for his work on Ogre Battle and later on Final Fantasy Tactics and Vagrant Story. Also in 1990, the Atlas team started a draft story of a game still named Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei 3, but as the license was owned by Namco, they decided to change the name to Shin Megami Tensei so as to release it under the Atlas name. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I encourage you to go watch my Retro Megami Tensei music selection video and to subscribe to this channel.